I was talking to Irfan and he said, उस दिन हम लोग के बीच कुछ ऐसा अजीब सा हुआ था, but वो दिखा नहीं स्क्रीन पे. And he also felt that. Yeah. So I was like, that's really strange. Actually, I wish people hadn't given me the advice that they did. For example, when I started out, many people said, don't do small parts in films. But every bone in my body said, this is the only way you can introduce other people to your work. This is like running a small business, you know.
How difficult is it to do a press tour for an independent film and dodge questions about Mirzapur season 3?
I don't dodge questions.
Rasika, it is always great to have you on Film Companion and this time at the FC office. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's always good to be here.
It's also especially wonderful to be talking to you today about a small independent film that's getting a theatrical release. You know, your film Fairy Folk, which has been traveling the festival circuit for the last year, is releasing in theaters on the 1st of March. And especially right now, it just feels like anytime a smaller, meaningful film is getting a release, you just want to champion the hell out of it. So I'm glad we can be talking about it.
Yes, I'm so glad it's getting a theatrical release.
Yeah, exactly. And you just really, really want to sort of root for those. But I want to start there. I know that neither of us are trade analysts or producers, but I'm really curious to get your take on the current landscape, because it felt like last year was all about the big, massive superstar, blockbusters, and it just feels like a very, very uncertain time for smaller films. So what do you make of the current landscape, and is there hope for more meaningful, interesting, distinctive movies like Fairy Folk?
I hope so. I have to admit that I'm a little confused myself about the current landscape, because there's a lot of things that I keep hearing, and much of it is hearsay. Some of it is my own experiences, but I don't know how to make sense of it currently. And I think the few years that we thought that the streaming services were going to solve the independent film problem of always finding a distribution bottleneck, maybe that phase is gone. Yeah. And that's why I'm happy that we are making this very brave and courageous attempt to release this film theatrically. But Karan Gaur's very optimistic view.
Who's the director of the film?
Who's the director of Fairy Folk. His very optimistic view is that when things are in flux, that's the time when something as different as our film can probably find its way through the cracks, because nobody knows what to do. So maybe they'll just pick this up, So I don't know what's happening in terms of streaming services and their views on independent films. It seems like acquiring is something that people are not, acquiring a film is something that they're not able to give very good deals on. And most independent films sort of either don't make it to a streaming platform or get arm twisted into a really bad deal. None of this is encouraging for me to hear, because I started my career with independent films, and it really sort of gave me an opportunity as an artist to showcase my work, even though that work was not reaching a wide audience at that time. Yeah. And then I thought, with the coming of the streaming space, that now there's going to be room for all of us. But yeah, in this regard, I think we are going through a flux, and I hope we overcome it and there's a brighter side to it.
Yeah. I really like Karan's perspective on that, and we remain very hopeful, because as an audience, people really deserve distinctive narratives, things that are different from the same.
Even as performers, I think we really deserve projects which are different.
And this is such a different film. We were talking earlier. Fairy Folk is this really oddball, wonderfully weird relationship drama about a couple that sort of adopts this very strange human-like creature, and then how that then unravels their relationship in a very, very interesting way. And the couple in the film is played by you and your real husband, Mukul. And you've both talked a lot in interviews about how this was a very improvised film. It really was, the dialogue was you, the both of you. And you said in an interview recently that working on an improvised film is an actor's delight. This style of shooting gave us the room to explore the many odd things that people do and say. The beautiful oddities is that sometimes get lost in the need to write a logical script. This is the kind of film which is a must-have for the life of an actor. So I really wanted to take this opportunity to really unpack and look at what improvising really looks like. Because it's a term that's thrown around a lot. And I just want to know, from an actor's perspective, what that really looks like and what effective improvising looks like.
So you're right. Like, most people tend to think that improvisations mean ki khade hoke kuch bhi kar lo, you know, and it's not like that at all. It's like playing a sport, actually, because no game is like the other game. It's a new game every day. but you have to have practiced the game like a team. You have to have worked with your team to understand the rules, because there are certain rules, and you have to play by those rules and practice that game every day. And then you go on a show, when you do it as a theatrical performance, and it's a new show. You don't know what's going to happen that day, whether you're going to get the laughs or not, whether the jokes are going to work or not, and what those jokes are going to be, what your co-actor is going to do. And then to bring it to a screen space is another deal, but I'll come to that later. But basically, there are certain rules, and the first rule of improv is something called yes and, which I think is extremely important in the life of any actor. So that was the basic idea of this film, that Karan had written a rough structure for every scene, but how the scene starts, where it goes, how it ends was not there on paper and not been discussed between actors or Karan before, So there's an intention to the scene. The 3-4 lines he'd written for the scene sort of told us this is where the scene is supposed to roughly go, but how you get there, we don't know. So we start the scene by giving offers to each other, and then we continue. And sometimes we went on forever.
So your takes went up to like 25 minutes.
Yes, the longest takes for that. And it was, I think, a nightmare for the technical team, because usually when we shoot films, much is fixed. And sometimes it depends on everybody's shooting style, but sometimes it's really like, okay, you have to hit that mark. And you can't go beyond this. And just tell me where you're going to move so that the technical team is better equipped. Here we didn't know what was going to happen at all. So the technical team really, I think, had to, I think they must have cursed the life out of us, because they didn't know how to light for the shot. They didn't know how to pull focus for the shot.
What to be prepared for.
And the boom guys were holding the boom for like 25 minutes.
But what would you say to an actor who says, look, this improv is a skill I really want to develop. And I do think, and I do think I'm a good actor, and I do think I can do justice to material, but the idea of building on it and going off of it makes me very nervous. I really want to be able to do it, but it just freaks me out. What would you say? Like, what advice would you have to be able to be present enough with a character to really just go with it?
So, for example, I would go to all these improv workshops, but I would never do a show because I was nervous exactly about this. I felt that I was good at accepting an offer. Like I had been to film school, I'd been to acting school. I knew how to not negate my co-actor, but I didn't know how to take the story further. And I still don't know if I know that, and that's why it's important to work with a team. And I've practiced this before. Because, for example, just between Mukul and me, I know that my yes is stronger than his yes, but his and is stronger than my and. He knows, he sometimes tends to negate. I always accept, but he knows how to take the story further, and I don't really know that. So, and especially because of that, because we had worked with each other in an improv situation, this film became so much easier and actually very joyous, because I knew that if I would I would get stuck there, he would be able to help me out, So because we already had that kind of working rhythm, and we'd played as a team before, So with a team that you've not done improv with before, this would have been hard.
So what happens, obviously this film, it was so heavily improvised in such an interesting way, but what happens in a more conventional project where there is a script, there is dialogue, and you really do want to try something and you want to improvise, what are the rules there? Are you telling the director beforehand? Are you just going for it in the scene? Are you telling your co-actor? Are you surprising them? Is there rehearsal? How do you do it there?
I don't know, different in different setups, but if I was to go completely off script, I would probably not plan it. So I would probably do it on take. If I felt that I had the room for it, if I was comfortable enough in that scenario where I felt that, I can do something fun on take. And my director won't beat me up for it or be really upset that I spoiled the take, But most setups that I've worked in, they've been very appreciative of any small improvisation that has found its way into a very sort of structured script or a screenplay. Because it's always great fun. Suddenly you surprise yourself, and therefore you surprise your co-actor. And I almost, at least my way of working is I almost never plan it. Because if I've planned it, then I'm trying to be clever. Then I'm trying to almost trick my co-actor, and that's not the intention at all. The intention is that even in a scripted setup, when I'm meeting my co-actor, they inspire something in me and I have the ability to go with it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that I want to be funny or I want to be clever or I found an interesting line and I'm like, hey, you know, I did improv. you
It's
know?
never like you're sitting with a script the night before and be like, no, I can do something here. It's always more spontaneous.
I don't work like that.
Yeah.
There are some actors who do, and that's another way of doing things. But I almost never do that because if I've thought it, I've kind of lost interest in it,
Yeah.
you know, already.
Yeah.
Like if I've thought that, oh, when he says this or when he or she says this, maybe this is a fun thing to do. I feel like that's still a little banavati, you know,
Yeah.
that still has a quality of trying to perform. That's not really responding to, because how do I know how my co-actor will deliver that line that day?
Yeah.
If I've thought that I'm going to respond that in a certain
It's
fashion,
calculated.
then I'm not really listening to how they've given me the line. You know?
But what if you tried something different and your co-actor didn't receive it well and it completely throws them off guard? What happens then?
I accept that also.
Okay.
You know, I have to accept that. I did something, and if they fumble, they have to accept their fumbling, and I have to accept. I can't say, "Arey yaar,
Yeah.
you didn't take my improvisation,"
Yeah.
you know. Or
I was giving you gold.
yeah, or that person can't say that, "Arey, I messed up, cut."
Yeah.
You know, it shouldn't be that.
Yeah.
So that's why both people have to have the same idea while doing a scene.
Yeah.
So the best acting experiences have been when co-actors, whether they've done improv or not, you know, just sort of come to the scene with an idea that today we are going to experience something with each other rather than do something.
Rather than just like stick to.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of favorite examples from sort of other projects where you really felt that you created something spontaneous in the moment with another actor, which wasn't necessarily in the script, that really sticks with you?
Yes, there's one story that because it's the first time that happened. There's a film called Qissa, which I had done, which
is wonderful.
Has the most beautiful co-actors I've ever had, and to have three of them in the same film together early on in my career
This was Irrfan and Tilotoma.
Irrfan, Tilotoma, and Qissa.
Yeah.
And I was doing, and that is also magic realism. You know, that film is also, besides Fairy Folk, and that's sort of, in one sense, a purer magic realism film, because this is like Fairy Folk is like magic realism meets relationship drama. You know, it's like that. And Qissa was more sort of giving into the genre of magic realism. So there's that point in a magic realism film where suddenly all of it is beyond logic, right? And then in those scenes, you don't know what's going to happen. And as an actor who's starting out and this was my first sort of big role with well-known actors, and I was so keen to do the best job that I could, you know. So especially in those scenes, I was very nervous about it, but also nervous to ask my director too many questions, because I felt that, you know, I knew then that that I'd had enough training to know that you can't really ask logical questions in this space. So don't like burden somebody else with that. But I was very tempted because I was so nervous, right? So there were these times when I would ask Anup, the director, I would say, Anup, do you want me to do something in this scene? And he would be like, no. Just he would recite a poem. That's Anup's style. And then they really sometimes on shoot when, you know, all of this is great and the poetry is lovely and Anup's style of directing is absolutely lovely and I totally love him. But there are some days on shoot when you're like, just tell me what to do.
I feel great, but I need direction.
Yeah. And you'd be like, no, just go into the scene. So there's a scene between Irrfan and me, and it's my final scene in the film. And I meet him at a point where he is part real and part ghost, and he's a mix of Tilotma and him, and he's effectively, if I have to put it very simply in the way you see it, he's effectively swallowed her, you know, so that's what happens in the film, and you see it visually right before this. And when he comes to me, I sort of meet this person, one who's violated me and one who's loved me, you know, and I don't know what to sort of think of it and feel of it. And he then starts telling me about his own grief and the grief that he's carrying because he was a refugee and he'd been uprooted from where he was. And really his sort of struggle with finding his identity and describing that grief a little bit. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but there was this moment that Irfan and I, and the scene, we shot the scene and it was terrible. And I felt nothing, and Irfan was sitting next to me, and I looked at him and desperately, like I was like, I have to make this work. And I just completely looked at him desperately. And he's an experienced actor, and he's probably faced situations where scenes haven't worked. And he looked at me and he looked at my desperation and just said, like, sometimes
Happens.
nobody can do anything.
Yeah.
And I was terribly upset about the scene. And 2 days later, I got a call from Anup saying that, do you mind if we reshoot the scene? I said, do you mind?
Hell
I
yes.
would come jumping to reshoot the scene, but just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, I can't tell you what to do. Just come for the scene. And I went for the scene, and Irfan and I met again. And he looks at me and I look at him, and he says his monologue, and then something very dark and strange happens between us, which leads to me sort of sitting down in this very weird way, where there's almost something sexual, but there's love, but there's fear, and there's all of it. Like, I can't really explain it because it's that moment. Something happened is the best way I can explain it, because it was just a day where we were, I guess, probably more willing to connect with each other than another day, But I watched that scene. The funny story is that I watched that scene and I felt nothing. And I was deeply disappointed because I'd felt so much while doing it. And then I remember we were at a film festival, and I was talking to Irfan, and he said, उस दिन हम लोग के बीच कुछ ऐसा अजीब सा हुआ था, but वो दिखा नहीं स्क्रीन पे. And he also felt that. Yeah. So I was like, that's really strange. That's a really weird thing.
I guess you can only hope that if you feel it there, it does translate. And that does sound like one of those scenes that you really will hold on to forever.
Yeah, and it's funny, like in filmmaking, right? Which is what is very fascinating about it also, is that you think something is going a particular way, but it's not. You've experienced something special, but if it hasn't been captured in that way, then it will not translate on screen. And the reverse is also true. Yeah. Fortunately, I've been saved on many scenes where nothing has happened between actors, but just the way we've been lensed and lit has brought out the meaning in it.
I also have to ask you the big question. How difficult is it to do a press tour for an independent film and dodge questions about Mirzapur season 3?
I don't dodge questions. Karan keeps nudging me. I say what I know, which is exactly what I know, which is I don't know when season 3 is coming out.
But can you give us, because your character at the end of the last season ended up in, every time you think she's a master manipulator, she raises the stakes in such an exciting way. Can you give us some essence of what season 3 has in store, even if it's not specific plot points, but just like something about what excited you or what we can be looking forward to?
Can I be very honest?
You absolutely
I've completely forgotten. I just told you, I have this memory where I'm very involved. I seriously am. I cannot.
Unfortunately, I believe you.
You do believe me. Yeah. Thank you. Because I'm not making this up to dodge your question at all. But I really have to struggle to think. But I mean, stuff that I remember, I cannot say because they are spoiler related.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about a script like Mirzapur. There's so much happening at every point that I don't know what I can say without it being a spoiler. And with half a memory, I don't think I should go there.
But you were excited by what you read and what you saw and what you did.
It was different.
Yeah.
And every season is a different script. And there's always such a gap between the release of one season and by the time I get the script of another season, because tons of people have really worked hard on it in between. And by the time it comes to me, I have imagined many things in between, and very often that is not what I see on paper. So there is sort of, getting used to what I had imagined in that time period versus what there is on paper. And we had different writers this season. So that also, there was a different tonality to it.
But it's all shot. You've dubbed for it. I saw that Instagram post. So it's ready to go now. We just wait for a release date.
Yes.
Well, we look forward to that.
And I think that's going to be soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bloody hope it is.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask, something that we've talked about quite a lot in, the various times I've spoken to you in the past. You've talked a lot about how difficult it is for an actor who comes into the industry, says, look, I think I'm talented. I think I can do a lot of work. but then you have to navigate that really frustrating perception, packaging, the social media of it all, and sort of find your feet, because that is unfortunately a big part of the game as well. Do you feel more comfortable navigating that world now than before?
Yes and no, because I think I feel more comfortable about the idea that I have to do all this. Because earlier I was such a purist that I would be like, I'm an actor and a performer, and all this is not something that I will, this is below my level.
Which is what you'd hope, but yeah.
And but now I'm accepting that this is like running a small business, that I have to do things which I didn't think starting out I would have to. So I'm more comfortable with the idea. Am I still comfortable doing all of it on a daily basis? No, I have to push myself. There are days where I feel, no, this is fun. There are parts of it which are fun. But then there are days that I feel this is not what I really wanted to do, and I didn't know this was a part of the deal. Yeah.
I guess you learn to enjoy the bits that you do enjoy.
Yeah.
So what advice would you have for that actor, or you from a few years ago, where they feel like I really want to do meaningful work, and for me it's about characters and craft, but then there is this part of it. There's the following. There's all of that world. There's navigating the industry. What advice would you have for that person?
I don't know, man, in terms of advice, because I kind of.
What do you wish somebody told you about all of this a few years ago?
What do I wish somebody told me? Actually, I wish people hadn't given me the advice that they did.
It's the bad advice.
Because, no, I don't know if it was good or bad, but it was confusing because I spent some of my time thinking whether I should listen to them or not. And it was often different from what I was thinking at that time. For example, when I started out, many people said, don't do small parts in films. And that always used to bother me every time I was accepting a small part in a film. And I was like, should I not be doing this? Because, that person said, don't take a small part, you'll never get bigger parts. But every bone in my body said, this is the only way you can introduce other people to your work. Otherwise, I didn't feel I was the kind of person who sort of made an impact in a social scenario. In fact, I find that is a part of the career which I have to sort of push myself towards. And I always felt that, even if I would go to a social gathering, I would never be able to say the right things or talk to the right people or even express
network.
Or even express that I would want to work with them. In fact, I would end up being really awkward and say some really weird thing and never know how to start a conversation or end a conversation or whatever. So I thought that that's the best way for me to find people who I want to work with and for people to know about my work was to do these smaller parts and then get bigger parts. And I did that. I did about 14 films in that. And I met so many people who were ADs then, who are now very celebrated directors and writers and producers, who then called me for work later. So I think the advice I got was a little confusing. So I wouldn't give advice to people because I really feel it's your own journey. And if you feel that something is going to work, try.
But I think there's something quite wonderful about that, because that's the thing. A lot of actors must be inundated with advice and noise and things that don't make sense to them. So just the idea of trust yourself and stick to your instincts is quite wonderful. Just on a closing note, I want to talk about what you have next coming up. You said something very interesting in an interview about your dream job. Your professionally, your goals. And you said, I really want to do two things. The first is to play the lead role in a biopic, and the second is to have a central role in a comedy drama. So I'd love to know more biopic about someone specific, or is it just the idea of a biopic? What excites you there?
The idea of a biopic is very exciting because how do you play a part? How do you be a person who people already know and they have perceptions of that person? And
it's a fun challenge as an actor.
Yeah, and there's so much already about them. But how do you then find the person they actually might have been, So that's very interesting, I feel. And also, I think sometimes when you do a biopic, you tend to be too much in love with the person you're playing. And how do you then be that person who is some critical of themselves, and therefore you're critical of that character also while you're playing them? And how do you play them as a human, as humanly as possible, where there's so much conflict and confusion, but there is an exterior which is probably different from that,
without the image of that person.
So that is very interesting. But I would love to, which I've said very often, which I now have an opportunity to say again.
Please do put it out in the universe.
I would love to be Amrita Pritam, because I thought she was really a woman who acknowledged her obsessions.
Yeah.
In fact, when I read her biography, Rasidi Ticket, and there's one that stood out to me. I almost felt that she was very openly talking about her obsessions, which I hadn't heard women speak about very often. So that had sort of an influence on me in my early life, and when I was too busy hiding my obsessions or just too embarrassed of them.
So for anyone making that biopic, hopefully yours will be the
Yes.
first number they ring. And the lead in a comedy drama, again, that was very specific. It was just the comedy drama thing that excited you, or was it the idea that it's a lead
I
role?
feel very almost angry about the idea that people don't really associate comedy with women.
Yeah.
They don't do that easily, and I don't like that. They almost feel like women are there to portray compassion and sadness, maybe, but the fun, the humor that.
You're very funny and humorously yours. The TVF show on Z5, right? Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But see, there also I get to play the part that the lead role plays off.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Vipul is
He's the comedian.
and
yeah.
he's an excellent stand-up comic.
Yeah.
His sets are very, very funny. I find them very relatable
Yeah.
and hilarious.
But you're still playing off of that. character.
Yeah. So I want to be something like Veep.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite shows,
Yeah.
and I think she's fantastic in it. And yeah.
Well, we look forward to watching you make us laugh. Hopefully
Thank
soon.
you. Thank
But
you.
till then, like I said, Fairy Folk, it is just so encouraging. It's such a distinctive film, and to see that get a theatrical release, you just want to champion the hell out of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching this video, and now I have a special announcement about FC Gold. What is that, you're wondering? FC Gold is Film Companion's recognition of excellence in storytelling. In this packed month of releases, our team of critics curated and nominated a bunch of films and artists. Here's who won FC Gold in February. Tamil film Lover, directed by Prabhu Ram Vyas. Malayalam film Brahmayugam, directed by Rahul Sadashivan. Hindi Malayalam language series Poacher, created by Richi Mehta. Nimisha Sajayan's performance in the series Poacher, which you can watch on Amazon Prime Video. Chetan Wagh's performance in the Marathi film Atma Pamphlet, which you can watch on Amazon Prime Video. I sincerely hope you have the opportunity to enjoy these films and series whenever you can. Stay tuned to Film Companion for a continuous stream of curated content.